Okay, moving on. Troy Stevens. Hey, Troy. I got two of them here. Have you had any further thoughts about decentralization or building parallel institutions as alternatives to progressive dominated strongholds? It's hard to know where to start with this, but it seems like an important idea that I'd like to be involved in and contribute to. Thank you. This kind of takes me back to the whole common sense resistance thing. And the idea of non-hierarchical structures. I think to answer your question directly is to say that's where we're going, and there's nothing anybody can do to stop it. And on balance, I think it is overwhelmingly a good thing. Overwhelmingly a good thing. So progressive dominated institutions are vertical institutions. They are structured, and they have to be structured because they're collectivists. What's the point of being able to tell people what to do if there aren't any people to tell what to do? So even something as kind of as straight out capitalist as the General Motors in the 1960s. It was extremely vertical. You started in the mailroom, you worked your way up. You became a vice president. You retired at 65. They gave you the gold watch. You had your heart attack at 67, and that's basically it. That vertical structure can be controlled by the people in the boardroom. But what can't be controlled are individuals who are connecting to perform specific tasks and then dissolving back into the soup so that they can recombine with other individuals to perform other tasks. The society we're heading into, and I think this is great because, again, there's nothing the progressives can do to control this, and furthermore, I think this is inevitable. We're moving into a world where it's like an amino acid soup, and all of these proteins assemble themselves basically in order to accomplish this task, and then they dissolve again, and that's kind of sad, but at the same time, it's not. I'm sure I've mentioned this before. I will tell the bucket story. I was working on a show that I liked very much when I was back when a TV editor, and it was just one of those shows where everybody was just great. Everybody was fun. Everybody got along. Everybody had a good time, and we did that show for about a year, I guess. And then it got canceled, and so we had our wrap party, and it was for all of us really the most fun show we'd ever worked on. We were feeling pretty sad about it. Some people were crying. Not me, of course. I was just staring steely-eyed off into the distance. But the production manager said something, and I never forget it. He said, "Hey guys, don't be sad. We're all going to work together again, just not at the same time." That's showbiz. And that is where the entire society is heading. It's heading to a world of gigs. And so gigs is in like a musical job, not as in gigabytes, because we're way past the world of gigs now. We're past the world of terrors too, as well. So the Buckhead story. So this is the world that's coming. It's not the world that's coming. It's here. I saw it happen in 2004, and you probably saw it too. I've said it a few times on the show. It bears retelling because it is so important. And I'll make it quick. In 2004, CBS News, as an October surprise to ruin George Bush's chances of re-election, ran a story about George Bush being AWOL from the Texas Air National Guard. And the smoking gun evidence was a memo that looked like a memo from 1967. I mean, it was aged, and did I say 60 Minutes? It was 60 Minutes. Sorry, it wasn't CBS News. 60 Minutes, and they produced a memo, and the memo basically, I think the header was CYA for Cover Your Ass, and basically the letter was written from the point of view of his commanding officer, noting that he was away without leave, and that he didn't know whether he should report it or not because his father was so powerful. And this was the smoking gun that George Bush was AWOL. And everybody in the comments section here is a bit ahead of me because most of us know this story, but if you haven't heard it. So this was their evidence, and this was going to do a lot of damage, especially since John Kerry was the opponent, and Kerry was making himself out to be a war hero, and the whole story behind that would take the rest of the year, but needless to say. And so this was pretty damning and potentially very, very damaging to George Bush about 3 weeks before the election. So that's what CBS did, and then CBS made a very, very big mistake. Very big mistake. They posted that memo on their website as proof that this were true. That was a big mistake. Within an hour or so, a commenter on Free Republic named Buckhead took a look at this memo and said, well, isn't that odd? Isn't what odd? Well, this memo is supposedly typed in 1967, but I forget what George Bush's squadron was. Let's just say the 1176th. Okay, whatever, 1148th. It was typed in 1967, but it says here, referring to the 1148th Tactical Fighter Squadron, whatever it was, it's got the 48, and then the TH is just, 48th. Yeah. Well, typewriters didn't do that. When you were typing on a typewriter, you had to write 48, and then the letter T and the letter H. How did this thing get kerned up there like that? And then everybody went, oh, now, wait a minute. Charles Johnson, who ran Little Green Footballs, a total champion for justice, and then I guess he just hit a rock or something. One of his bike tours, he's gone barking mad. Really insane. But once somebody pointed out this thing that wasn't seen because it was so common, we're so used to it now, it's what word processors do. It's just automatic. You type it in and it just changes it automatically. Once somebody pointed that out, Charles Johnson looked at the memo, printed it out from the web, got on Microsoft Word in the default settings. He opened Microsoft Word, he didn't change any of the margins, he didn't do anything. And he typed out the memo, word for word, and he printed it out, and they were absolutely identical. And then Charles Johnson did a GIF of here's the claimed original, and here's the one that I just printed out of Word. And while the original had letters that were kind of a little degraded and dirt on it and stuff because it was aged, it was artificially aged to make it look real, it's no question that it had been typed into Microsoft Word. These idiots, this is why the left is failing and is going to fail, because they really don't understand that we are not the idiots they make us out to be, but there are idiots in the room. It's just not the conservatives. And so once that happened, all hell broke loose. CBS, first of all, CBS said that the White House was coordinating this effort. And I'm pretty sure that the White House had nothing to do with coordinating this effort. The White House could not have coordinated the effort because the White House wasn't smart enough to coordinate this effort. The level of the White House intelligence was at about the same level as the level of intelligence at 60 Minutes. What was happening in real time was far, 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 far beyond any second wave, top-down vertical institution could ever possibly keep up with. So now there's a smoking gun evidence, all right, but it's smoking gun evidence against Dan Rather, who basically ran this thing on national television, this assassination attempt, and And now, not to say just egg on his face, but nevertheless, So Rather and CBS doubled down. Here's the best part of the story. Dan Rather and CBS doubled down on this. Rather says the document is absolutely authentic. And somebody says, well, there were no, you can't do this on a typewriter. And then CBS and Rather said, not true. Not true at all. Turns out that there was a typewriter that did this kind of kerning kind of thing and superscripts and stuff, not kerning, superscript. And it turns out it was like a $7,000 or $8,000 IBM machine that did typesetting, 1967, don't forget. It did typesetting and is capable of doing that. Forget the fact that it came out in Microsoft Word default settings. So that begs the question, why this remote fighter wing of the Texas Air National Guard, a memo written in a Quonset hut probably someplace in 1967, why is it that major in a military base have a $7,000 typewriter at his desk in 1967? I mean, when you say that, I really do think that when they made that claim, when CBS made the claim or offered that up as an argument, I know they were in a panic, but I don't think they were. I think they were in such a panic they did not realize just how unbelievably damning this is. Okay. So people are laughing this out of the courtroom. Okay, so some guy in the Air Force National Guard has a $7,000 typewriter to write memos about, and nobody else in the entire military has one of these. Why? It's absurd on its face, and everybody knows it. It's just ridiculous. And then somebody said, no, the IBM selector could do it. If the IBM selector did this, this, and this, you could get it done if you changed the ball or something like that. As if this major who's writing a memo to himself is going to get to the 168th stop, remove the selectric ball, put the other one in there with a different type TH, and then pull that off again, get the other one. This is the level of desperation they were reaching to. But he said, but the IBM selector could do it. And then this is the part I'll never forget as long as I live. I don't remember where I saw it. Probably it was Little Green Footballs. But somebody came up and said, no, the IBM selector can't do that. It's not capable of doing what you said it did. On some sort of public forum about this. It might have been the CBS forum. And they said, well, how the hell do you know? I was on Free Republic. Thanks, Steve. And he said, well, the reason I know that the IBM selector couldn't do it is because I was the chief engineer of the IBM selectric. I was in charge of building that typewriter. And that's just... So what happened? What did we see? What was actually happening? What was actually happening was individuals working on their own, looking at the same problem, brought their unique experiences and perspectives to the problem, put them all in a box, and in the space of just a couple, as I remember, it was most a day, utterly destroyed the argument. Utterly. And when it was over, these guys didn't get together and drink beers, and they weren't hired as a think tank or anything. They weren't even looking for the story. I'm wandering through the internet. Here I am. Look at that. Oh, well, that's interesting. Well, that's not true about the Selectric. I was the engineer on this. And so they found themselves. And then when that task was finished, once CBS looked as idiotic and frankly as criminal as they did and do, and Dan Rather was ruined, which couldn't happen to a nicer guy. Once that happened, that molecule just fell apart back into atoms, back into its individual proteins. It just simply fell apart, and those pieces didn't get destroyed. They just went back into the soup to connect with other things, and that is the age we live in now. One example that I've talked about a lot, and I am very tempted, honest to God, I am so tempted to just run it once during the Stratosphere Lounge, but I won't put you through that. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Go to YouTube and look up a guy who's just brilliant, really funny. named Internet Historian. Great, great, great narration. He's got this fantastic accent. He's very, very dry, very, very funny. But look up Internet Historian, and he's got 4 different episodes called, what is it, HWNDU. Windu is it, for He Will Not Divide Us. And I don't. I have to remember what episode it is. I'll post a link for it next time. But basically, when Trump was elected, Shia LaBeouf decided as a protest that he was going to put a live webcam on the streets of New York, and people could just come up to it and comment about how awful Donald Trump was, and saying he will not divide us. And he had T-shirts printed up. That was his slogan that Shia LaBeouf came up with. He will not divide us. And so people were coming in and they were talking about, oh, Trump's a Nazi and Trump's this and all of that. And then, and the left still doesn't understand this. They never understand it. They're too stupid to understand it. People started making comments on that webcam that were so obviously provocations. They were so obviously trolling people. But Shia LaBeouf not only believed it, he actually assaulted a guy, because I think the guy came up to the camera and said Hitler didn't do anything wrong. If you can't smell that is trolling from a guy who's just the guy's not a skinhead or anything. They had and I think he just hit him. I think he got arrested. So anyway. So Shia shuts down the webcam on the New York City street, and then he puts it someplace else. And then 4chan finds it in 37 hours or something like that. The one I remember, because it was by far to me the most compelling one, was so then Shia LaBeouf sets up a webcam where he's got the He Will Not Divide Us flag. It is flying on a flagpole. The camera is outside. It's against the sky. There's absolutely no way to know where it is. It's just in the middle of nowhere. And so Shia LaBeouf figured, no, I've got them now. They'll never find this, obviously. This story is so amazing. It's actually the most amazing. This is such an important story. It seems so trivial, but it's not. It's not. It is so, so important. So he's flying this flag, and there's a webcam on the flag, and you really have to hear this guy, Internet Historian, describe, because his narration is just masterful, and the video work is terrific too. But basically, what he says is, he said, "All right, so there's a live webcam. So 4chan, which certainly has negative things to be said about 4chan as well, but I admire the general overall attitude. I can't endorse every single individual on it, but I sure do love their attitude as a general rule. So 4chan, who are the guys who basically were taking offense at this whole Shia thing, and which tells me I'm sure they're not conservatives, but they certainly seem libertarians. So all the 4chan guys who do nothing but stay on the internet all day, they refer to themselves as weaponized autism, another genius term, which is self-deprecating humor, and therefore a sign of not only intelligence but wisdom. Now they had a problem. Where is this flag? They were determined to beat Shia LaBeouf, and as a group of guys with unbelievable IQs, they're 160 plus for sure. People who are too smart for the world, too smart to go out in public. They just don't belong. They just don't fit. So these guys started looking at the problem. And then, as Internet Historian points out, telling the story, he said, well, first of all, it's a live webcam, so they notice that the sun is going down, and they check their watches, and they realize that, okay, it's Eastern time zone. Sun's going down, it's live, it's got to be in the Eastern time zone. You've immediately eliminated 3/4 of the United States and the entire rest of the globe. So just by one instantaneous observation, you've narrowed it down significantly to the Eastern time zone. And then a lot of stuff happened, but the part of it that is just mind-boggling is they've got nothing but a flag against a sky. How the hell do they tell where this flag is? They know it's in the Eastern time zone, but how do they tell? Sorry. And so as we're watching the live stream, they see a couple of jet contrails up high. The routine kind of gassing of the American people that's ejected from selected commercial airliners designed to poison everybody, including the pilots and their children down on the ground, but I digress. They see these two contrails up there, and they look at the angle, and they say to themselves, okay, these two planes are here relative to each other. This is happening live. Why don't I go to one of these websites on the internet that show me live air traffic control returns of every single airplane that is in the sky? And doing this, they kind of did a screen grab, and they looked at some candidates, and they thought they found one that really could have been it. And so these guys said, if we're right, if this is the place that we think it is, then at 11:49 tomorrow morning, we should see a contrail coming in this direction, and then 3 minutes later see another one going that way. And sure enough, it's exactly what they did. So now they had it within 20 square miles, something like that. They looked at the terrain and things like that. And finally, when they finally got close, the way they finally figured it out was the webcam was not only transmitting video, it was transmitting audio as well. So once they knew about where it was, they had a guy who was in the neighborhood, just happened to be living fairly close to that place in Tennessee. And they had him drive around and beep his horn every 10 seconds or something. And then they sat there and just listened to the webcam. And when they heard the horn, they just keep listening to the beeps, and they say, getting warmer, getting colder. And using this simple form of Marco Polo triangulation, walked right up to the flagpole, took a picture of it, and hung a MAGA hat over it or something, and a Pepe thing or something like that. But look, I am not intelligent enough to even seriously break down the problem, let alone solve it. If I was given that challenge, I suppose if my life depended on it and I thought about it for a long time, I could do a little better. But when I heard the story, I said, where on earth did they come up with this? It makes perfect sense after you've heard it, the same way that Shazam makes perfect sense, that app. It identifies the music that you're listening to. The second I saw Shazam work, that's what made me buy the iPhone. Second, somebody demonstrated Shazam in a restaurant, held it up, and it returned what song was playing. The instant that I saw it do it, I knew exactly how it worked. It did a sound recording, sent that back by the cellular network to a computer, compared it to all known recordings, did the match, and did it at high speed and sent back the answer. But could I have ever come up with that app? Not in a million years. So this is open source world. This is the world not that's coming. It's the world we live in, Troy, and it is a world of freedom. There's a freedom, total freedom, and that freedom can often mean some very dark and bad things, including child pornography and rape videos and all the rest of it, animal torture, all of that stuff. But freedom also means you cannot get away with this anymore. You just can't. It's the days of being able to lie and get away with it are over. The same thing happened with Hillary Clinton and all of those pieces of video that people managed to turn up, and guys said she's got multiple multiple sclerosis? Anyway, you get the idea. Yeah, and Steve Darrow says that's why the free market works. That is why it works. The free market works because this is the stuff that's happening in real time. It is going to, this is why socialism won't win. It can't win. It can't win against this. So there is definitely an upside to that.